to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2014, the first show of the new year. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Today, in our third hour, we're going to have a guest, Mark Howitt, who is the producer of a documentary regarding Sandy Hook that just lays out all of the problems with the official story. And, honestly with my audience, I don't agree with them on a few of those. But the sheer overwhelming volume of problems with that official story just hammers home the point this is another manufactured hoax to scare you out of your guns and into obedience and dependence on the U.S. government. Now, last week we were talking about this tragic story that happened over at the John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, where this professional flautist, Bujema Razgui, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, had his collection of handmade ethnic bamboo flutes confiscated by the Customs Department, and they were destroyed. Now, it turns out he did not witness the destruction himself. He was getting his luggage, and the case of flutes was empty, and there was a note saying, please call here to find out what happened. But it's a tragic story. It has just sent shockwaves through the arts and music community that the Customs Department would look at these musical instruments and say, oh, they're just pieces of bamboo, that's an agricultural product, and we have to take and destroy them. He is going to be our guest. This flautist will be our guest tomorrow in the third hour to talk about this horrible, horrible experience at the hands of America's security industrial complex. And understandably, we're going to be shoving Claire a little earlier in the show to have her come in with her perspective. But I felt it was really important to get this flautist on the show, and Friday was the only day that he was available. Now then, as you know, we just had the New Year holiday. And for pretty much the whole country, all you were allowed to buy to celebrate were party poppers. I remember 20 years ago, even today, right now, my wife and I were on our honeymoon on Kauai, and I love the fact that you could buy fireworks to celebrate New Year's with. In fact, you could get fireworks for New Year's, 4th of July, and the Chinese New Year. So you got fireworks 3 times a year, and we had fun. We got a big roll of firecrackers, went down to the beach. And every New Year since then that we've lived in Hawaii, I would go out and get a roll of 5,000 firecrackers as kind of an homage to my wonderful marriage and our wonderful honeymoon. And then, of course, a few years ago, when the government started worrying about Americans knowing how to light fuses on things that go bang, the fireworks went away, and we're allowed to have party poppers right now. Now, this year on Oahu, probably as part of this whole, well, they have fireworks, you don't want to go. They only had a few official fireworks shows for New Year. Down at Hilton Hawaiian Village, a couple of the other resorts, and they were pretty low-key. But the illegals, oh my goodness, what a show that was. And had I known it was going to be this intense, I would have set up a camera to catch it. Because it was probably the most intense fireworks display I have seen since the year 2000. And earlier in the week, of course, the local media had been going on about, if you're caught with illegal fireworks, you'll be sent to Guantanamo. And they were showing the piles and literally mountains of illegal fireworks they had already seized. But apparently they didn't get them all, because it was just insane. I mean, walked outside looking around, all points of the compass up in the sky, skyrockets and everything. Just a very benign act of defiance against the nanny state, saying we will decide for ourselves whether or not we're going to celebrate the New Year the way we wish to do it. And, of course, they're going to say, oh, but you're causing harm to people with health issues, and they're trying to fan up all these excuses why we should not be allowed to handle explosives. And the real issue is they're afraid of Americans being comfortable handling explosives. I actually got into a discussion with a police officer. We happened to be shopping at the same bottle shop. And I was bemoaning the fact that we're not allowed to have fireworks. And he said, well, you know, terrorists could take fireworks and they could fashion a bomb out of them. And I said, no, you can't. The kind of propellant in fireworks is a low-brisive, slow-burning propellant. it can't be made into an effective bomb. And if there were real terrorists around here, you could go into any supermarket, pick up 4 bottles of household cleaners, and create enough gas to gas everybody in the building. It's nonsense. It's just the government one more time showing us that they will run our lives for us. And the demonstration we got on New Year's was, at least around here, everybody standing up and saying, no, you won't either. And I'm very, very proud of my fellow Hawaiians for standing up to tyranny. I briefly toyed with the idea of loading up one of the black powder guns and letting it off, but I chickened out at the last minute. Actually, I was asleep. I didn't wake up until all the explosions started happening, and I went out and took a look, and wow, it was very impressive. Somebody actually got some of it on video. We posted it to whatreallyhappened.com. And it was an amazing display. It was certainly far more spectacular than the official 4th of July display we had 2 years ago over Pearl Harbor during RIMPAC. They didn't even have one this last year. You know, fireworks, you don't need to know about fireworks. If you want to play with things that explode, join the Army or the Navy or the Air Force. We'll give you lots of things that go bang, and even better, you can kill innocent civilians with it. Now then, turning over to ClimateGate, and I'm putting this up here at the top of the show because we are just finishing up this delightful, ironic saga of the MV Academic Sholkowski, which was a research ship. And I emphasize that because the corporate media is trying to portray it as a tourist junket. You know, it was just tourists going on down there looking at the Antarctic ice. No, it wasn't. This was a funded research mission to prove that global warming was melting the Antarctic ice shelf. So, of course, they went down there at the beginning of the summer season because if your continued funding is dependent on having pictures and videos of melting Antarctic ice, summer's a good time to do it. And they got stuck. Just before Christmas, they got stuck. Send in an icebreaker trying to reach him, that icebreaker got stuck. Send in a third one, kind of had to hold back. They got him off today with a helicopter airlift, but despite deteriorating weather. Now, the reality is, satellites are showing that the Antarctic ice shelf is 26% larger this year than last year. Those poor emperor penguins are having to walk 30, 40 kilometers more during their migration, if you're familiar with the lives of the emperor penguins and what an amazing thing it is that they can survive down there. But this side went down. We're going to study how global warming is melting the Antarctic ice shelf. And the ice shelf was larger. They were trying to basically follow the path of an earlier mission. They got into the ice. The ice turned out to be much thicker than expected, at least to the global warming scientists, who are still looking at their computer models rather than looking out the window and saying, hey, there's a lot of ice out there. Maybe we ought not to follow this course. And it's just absolutely hit up the idea that they were going down there at a specific time of year to create the visuals they needed to go on selling global warming, and they got caught. Now remember, if global warming, stopping global warming, were the real goal of Al Gore and NOAA and NASA and Hadley CRU and Penn State and all these other scientists, they would look at the very obvious cold weather and say, we've succeeded, we stopped global warming, and they would bow to the applause of the corporate media and waddle on off to whatever their next projects were going to be. But global warming isn't about the globe, it's not about warming, it is a political agenda, and it's all about carbon taxes and selling carbon credits that have made all of the players in this scam insanely rich. And I think the reason that they're still trying to push this whole global warming thing right in the middle of the start of another harsh winter is Obama's going to hit us with a carbon tax as soon as spring shows up, because he's not getting his money from Obamacare. He's desperate for more money from your wallet to solve his problems, and he's going to go to the carbon tax. I am predicting that right now on this show. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're still talking about this ship full of global warming researchers who were given $1.5 million to sail on down at the start of the summer season to document how global warming is melting the Antarctic ice shelf. They got stuck in ice, just got rescued this morning. And the spin coming from the global warming people is really the ice shelf is melting. It isn't. It's 26% larger this year than last year. Our ship just happened to get in the one bad area, and you shouldn't let this one rescue lead you to think that maybe we don't know what we're talking about when we tell you that you're making the world broil and you will atone by paying carbon taxes and buying carbon credits. But lest we forget, back in 2008, another group of these global warming researchers who were being funded to prove global warming declared the Arctic Ocean was ice-free because, after all, that's what Al Gore had promised in 2007. In 2007, and in 8, and in 9, Al Gore declared that by 2013, last year, the Arctic would be completely ice-free. Needless to say, that did not happen. More about that in a little bit. So these researchers got into these kayaks, and their goal was they were going to kayak across the top of the world to prove that it was all open water, the ice was going, and the world was warming, and it was all the fault of us icky-poo humans and our carbon dioxide. It's got nothing to do with water vapor in the atmosphere. It's got nothing to do with solar radiation. It's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. It's all the fault of human beings, that if human beings were not here, climate would not change, which, of course, the geologic and paleontologic records show is absolute complete nonsense. Climate's always changing. It did it long before people got here. We'll go on doing it long after we are replaced by hopefully something with a little more intelligence. So these kayakers, scientists, were kayaking across the North Pole. They got to about 80 degrees north latitude and got locked into the ice. They needed rescuing. So this has happened before, where they'll go out and make these declarations. Our computer model says it's open water, and they get stuck. Now, as I mentioned, back in 2007, and again in 2008, and again in 2009, Al Gore publicly and hysterically warned the North Pole would be ice-free by 2013 because of man-made global warming. And he cited climate experts, meaning all those people who were taking his funding to support him. And obviously 2013 did not have an ice-free Arctic. In fact, the ice cover expanded 50% over last year. And all these people on the mainland who are getting these Arctic blasts of air and snow and ice understand that. Yeah, it's really cold up there. Right now we're looking at this major storm that's descending across the Midwest and the Northeast. In fact, I was texting my younger brother just earlier today. He says it's just coming down insanely out there. People are canceling travel trips. 1,600 airline flights are now canceled. If you thought you were traveling someplace on the mainland U.S. today, you'd better hit that blog, that website, and make sure your plane is still going. Boston's Logan Airport is shut down completely by the storm. The mayors of Boston and New York and Detroit, they're brand new mayors just now coming into office, they're having to deal with this. They're looking at, in Boston, 10 to 14 inches of snow, and it's just insane. Remember back in 2000, the carbon Nazis were saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past. The spin now is, well, we don't know who planted those headlines. We don't know who was saying Greenland was going to lose all of its ice. We're not part of that. We never made those statements. We continue to insist the world is getting warmer, and the warm Earth creates cold weather, which violates several physics principles. Or the other one they come out there is the heat is hiding in the deep of the ocean, which is violating the principle of convection and thermodynamics. And their fallback always, and I was debating some very obvious shills over at CNN's website. And by the way, CNN blocked some of my comments when I was making really good points, I might add. So shame on CNN. But they always come back to, really, you're just an ordinary human being. You don't understand the principles these scientists are looking at. In other words, right now, when you are looking out your window and you're looking at all the snow and ice and wondering if this really means that there's nothing to global warming, the carbon Nazis are saying you're an idiot for thinking that. You're a stupid moron for thinking that all that snow and ice somehow undermines their offered dogma of human-caused global warming. And raising on a busted flush, I'm not kidding you, there was an article that came out in the Telegraph yesterday. World's climate warming faster than feared, scientists say. They've revised their computer models to downplay the cooling effect of clouds, and inevitably their computer model said, oh yes, it's getting warmer. It's getting warmer. Now, common sense is going to tell you that if you're pushing a global warming agenda, the last place you want to do that is at the start of what is going to be a very horrendous winter. So they're obviously under time pressure, and that's why I keep saying, when the snow starts to melt in the spring, I absolutely am convinced Obama's going to come back and say, we need a carbon tax, because he's not getting his expected windfall of new tax revenues from Obamacare, which is what that was all about, and they got to find some way to take more money out of your pocket to prop up this Ponzi scheme economic system here. Now, some of the corporate media is finally waking up to what's going on, and I have to do a tip of the hat over to the Daily Telegraph, which ran an interesting article in the icy grip of fear that global warming is claptrap. And it's a very funny, well-written article where it's very obvious this author understands it really has just been a complete public relations operation to convince you that global warming is real, that you are to blame, and that you will atone and seek absolution through carbon taxes and carbon credits. So some of the corporate media is beginning to come up and say, look, you know, it's gone too far. It's gone too far. Now, a little side note. Somebody was pointing out when we had the pictures of these global warming researchers in Antarctica, and there were penguins all around them, and they were getting very friendly with the penguins, and somebody pointed out that it is actually illegal in a lot of countries, including the United States, to touch a penguin. If you do not have a government permit to touch a penguin, you can be fined $5,000. If you injure or kill a penguin, you can be fined $10,000 and go to jail for a year. And that money goes into the U.S. Treasury under miscellaneous receipts. Now, my question would be, what is the fine when a police officer murders an innocent American? I haven't seen that number come out yet. What is the fine when a U.S. drone kills innocent civilians? Is there a fine on that one? And the reason I mention that is because modern liberalism seems to have elevated the legal protections of innocent animals above those of innocent human beings. Now, I'm all for nature and wise use of resources and trying to preserve endangered species, but I cannot approve of a mindset that makes the other animals on this planet legally more important and enjoy a higher privilege of protection than my fellow human beings. Because I am a human being, and I'm a part of nature. Am I not deserving of the same kind of protections? Now, moving on over to the economy, you're probably already aware that you, the generous, beneficent American taxpayer, bailed out U.S. automotive companies, including General Motors. We were all told that eventually General Motors would pay all that money back and we'd actually make a profit on the deal. That, of course, turned out to be false, and the American taxpayer took about a $15 billion bath on the GM bailout. GM, of course, expressed its gratitude to the American taxpayer by shutting down their factories in the United States and opening new factories in Mexico and China. And it gets worse when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to automotive hijinks and bailouts and so forth, we're going to take a phone call here. Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Michael, am I coming in a little better today?
Yes, you are.
Hey, Michael, I got to tell you what the weather was this morning. It was minus 17 degrees. And, Michael, I got to tell you a little secret. I wear shorts all winter in the challenge of Igor Gore's big, wide scam that he tried to lure the American people. Michael, I wanted to break this before you, too, that we saw Detroit Rock City get tore apart. All our jobs are going up there as far as most of them with the car. Now I was heard that Chrysler is moving to Italy.
That was actually the story that I was about to get to, is Chrysler, after getting their taxpayer bailouts, is moving their operations to Italy.
Yeah, so I'll let you, Michael, I'll stay warm. I'll let you get going, but it is a sad day in America to see our car dealers to totally be stripped and now be totally stripped by being sold overseas. And I also heard possibly that Ford might be going to Mexico. Can you confirm anything of that?
I've heard that as well. I think they already. They already have one factory down there, but yeah, they're all getting out of this country. There are so many taxes at all levels of society, because remember, we all talk about how corporate taxes are low, but what you don't realize is in order to hire a worker in this country, you have to pay them enough where they can pay their taxes and still be there. Plus, there are employee taxes that you are charged for the permission by the government to hire a worker. Now, all that withholding from your paycheck and those employment taxes means government's actually getting more money from your labor than you are. And that is the reason labor costs are so high in this country, and a lot of corporations are just saying it's time to get out, because the trend is not reversing anytime soon, because our government is hopelessly in debt to that private central bank, and their only solution is to find new ways to take money from people, either directly from you or indirectly through fees and fines and tariffs and everything on your products. You would be amazed when you go to a supermarket and you buy something off that shelf, how much of that price you are paying is taken up with various government fees, taxes, excises, and so forth. This is one of the reasons why our products are themselves so very, very cheap, because it's the only way to maintain the price point. Yeah, it's 12 cents of goo in a 14-cent plastic bottle, and the rest is, shipping, handling, tariffs, border fees, and the rest of it. It's alcohol. Most of the price you're paying on that is taxation. And it's just hit a point where corporations, just to save themselves from bankruptcy, are saying it's time to get out. It's exactly where we are. And that was the point I was going to make. Chrysler, after all the taxpayer bailout, is being sold to an Italian auto company, which is moving all the factories and jobs over to Italy. And apparently the United Auto Workers, which still owned part of Chrysler because of their big bailout, we went along with this deal. This is a sinking ship. The corporations know it. The ultra-rich know it. It's time for you to know it. Now then, there is a new law in Great Britain that banker salaries and bonuses have to be made public because of the huge outcry about how, following the 2008 collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud and all these endless bailouts that were going into Wall Street, and all these bankers were just taking the money and putting it in their pocket. And once again, looking at the end-of-the-year numbers, we're seeing huge amounts of pay. 100 of J.P. Morgan Chase top staff in London are averaging £2 million per year. Goldman Sachs said its top executives receive £2.7 million per year. It's up 50% over the year before. These guys are just raking it in, and they're paying for it all by dropping the losses on you, the American and British people, which, of course, is fascism here. Now, there's a very interesting article came out of 21st Century Wire about how student loans have become the new socially engineered banker trap. Because in the last 15 years, college tuition in the United States has risen 900%, making it impossible for anybody who is not independently wealthy to go to college without resorting to student loans. Now, in that same period of time, tuition has gone up 900%. The average wage in the country has gone up 10%, and that's not even keeping up with the rate of inflation. Now, the reality is there is one college-level job vacancy for every 5 college graduates in America today. So 4 out of every 5 college graduates, having sold themselves into the slavery of these student loans, are not going to find a job to pay it back. That, of course, is not what the college recruiters tell you. Oh, yes, get a degree, there'll be all these jobs, you'll pay it back in just no time. It's just another way of enslaving the people to manufactured, created out of thin air debt to keep us all slaves to those private central banks. By the way, speaking of bankers, you probably remember Aubrey Lee Price. Now, this was a guy who supposedly committed suicide in 2012, and when the story came out, I was looking at that and saying, I'm not buying this. But supposedly he committed suicide right about the same time $20 million vanished from his bank. Well, apparently they caught him today. He was pulled over in Georgia for driving with tinted windows on his car, which apparently is illegal in Georgia. I don't know why he was still in the United States of America, go figure, but he was pulled over. The cop became suspicious that he was being given false identification, and they took him in and discovered that this is the guy. Nice people, those bankers here. Another story coming out of the Daily Mail over in Great Britain. Remember the Enron scandal in California? How they literally were ripping off the people by just manipulating the electric market? Well, it turns out in Great Britain, what they call the big six energy firms have been overinflating the prices by which they sell electricity back and forth between their own power stations. So they can then use those high electric costs to run the bills up for the British people. It's the same electricity, it's the same generators. But when they have to buy electricity from this guy over here, oh, it's hugely inflated profit. Our costs are going up. We've got to pass it on to the consumer. It's Britain's version of the Enron scandal. Which brings us to Obamacare, which is now at least nominally in legal effect. More mayhem, more cancellations than enrollment. Hospital workers are going unpaid. It's a huge mess. Even Michael Moore, who was the champion for socialized government-managed health care, is saying Obamacare is awful. Up in Oregon, they spent a total of $300 million taxpayer dollars and achieved 44 actual sign-ups for Obamacare. Does that sound like an effective public policy? No, it doesn't. And the reality is here, we're now in that window of vulnerability because a lot of people who signed up through healthcare.gov and think they have health insurance coverage right now do not. Because they're still sorting out all the bad data coming out the rear end of this system. They've been putting all the work on making the front end work better so at least it looks good. They're not even dealing with the security issues. They're not even dealing with the fact that the database manager is flawed and the actual health insurance providers are getting garbage data they can't make sense of. They're manning up phone banks, calling people and saying, I think this is you, and if it is you, I need some more information. And there's a whole bunch of fraud already out there. People are out there. There's a bunch of bogus Obamacare websites, and they're easy to spot because they're the ones that appear to be working. Now, toward the middle of last month, we started seeing a ramp-up of what appeared to be very obvious false flag provocations between Israel and Gaza, commencing with this shooting of a Bedouin worker who was working on the apartheid wall. He was shot by a sniper from somewhere near the border with Gaza. The sniper got away. They don't know who it was. Nobody in Palestine is claiming credit for this. Israel is screaming, this is intolerable, we will not allow it. A couple of bottle rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel, again by parties unknown, and nobody's taking credit. Israel is now ready to invade Gaza. And they're saying the next attack will exact a heavy toll. Now, how many times do we have to see this fraud before we realize this is the same trick all over again? Israeli agents caused some provocations. Israel has the excuse to go in and murder more Gazans, and you are paying for it all. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and getting back on over to Israel. As you know, Israel is already indicating they are going to start constructing more of these illegal Jewish-only settlements on Palestinian lands in the West Bank. It is, of course, a major problem in terms of trying to start some kind of peace negotiations between Israel and Palestine. Israel is demanding the release of their spy, Jonathan Pollard, as a precursor to talks, and at the same time they're talking about settlement expansions, which is guaranteed to make the peace talks absolutely accomplish nothing. So once again, Israel will get what they want, their spy back, who's a big hero in Israel, and the U.S. will get nothing in return, except egg all over their face again. Now, Israel is going through the motions of courtesy to the United States of America. They've now said they're not going to announce the details of how much they're expanding the settlements in the West Bank until after Kerry has come and gone and talked to the Palestinians. They're still going to build the settlements. They're just saying we're going to time it so the political impact is less. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Tom in Minnesota. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. The global warming kind of makes me think they kind of blame the forest fires in western United States. And I was wondering, a lot of, I know that their chemtrailing is aluminum, and that's fuel, but oxidizers for thermite can include things like boron and silicone, iron oxide, magnesium, copper, lead.
Silicon is not an oxidant for thermite. It's not an oxidizer at all. Thermite is basically powdered aluminum and iron oxide, the black kind rather than the red kind. Both will work, but the black kind is more energetic. The problem is the global warming people are blaming everything on global warming, including, and I'm not kidding, I kept a list which I'll post during the next commercial break here. Prostitution, increase in prostitution was blamed on global warming. Increase in acne was blamed on global warming. Increase in earthquakes. Basically, they're out there. That's the villain. Oh, global warming is destroying us all. Therefore, you have got to pay carbon taxes and carbon credits. And yes, they blame the wildfires on global warming. It's just whatever is going wrong in the world. Waxy yellow buildup in your kitchen floor is the fault of global warming. And it's reached ridiculous levels.
Right. I would like to posit a theory, though, that if they're chem spraying.
Well, first of all, hang on. Hang on. First of all, okay. The chemtrail issue is one of the many nonsensical ideas being deliberately planted on the independent media to make us look silly, so that ordinary Americans will say, oh, those guys are a bunch of wacko. I'm going to go back over and be told what to think by the television networks here. Same thing with no plane at the Pentagon. Same thing with the idea that the Apollo moon landings were faked. It's called poisoning the well. It is a classic propaganda trick, and this government is desperate enough. They're trying them all right now. There are contrails from jet aircraft because they put out a lot of water vapor. But if somebody wanted to deploy something onto the surface of the Earth, doing it from 30,000 feet lacks a certain amount of efficiency. You don't know where it's going to go from the underlying winds. It's just not a tenable theory on that. Now, I want to talk to the issue about the recent Saudi Arabian aid to Lebanon. Everybody's making a big deal saying, oh, Saudi Arabia is aiding Lebanon $3 billion worth of material for weapons, which immediately Lebanon started shooting at those Syrian warplanes coming across their border. And everybody's saying, well, obviously Saudi Arabia is working with Israel, and that means that, yes, Saudi Arabia helped Israel, did 9/11, or did it all themselves. They're trying to demonize Saudi Arabia ahead of an invasion. But what's really going on here? Saudi Arabia is actually being very, very clever here. Okay? They understand that Hezbollah in Lebanon gives Israel the excuse to keep invading Lebanon over and over again, and Israel's making noises about starting it again. If the Saudis help the Lebanese government stabilize their country and rein in Hezbollah, then Israel loses their excuse to invade and take the Litani River. And I think that's what's really going on with all of this stuff here. Meanwhile, of course, trying to kick up a kerfuffle there as hard as possible, there's been an explosion at Hezbollah headquarters in Beirut. They're still saying the nature of the explosion isn't immediately clear. I don't know. How does a cruise missile or a guided munitions sound to you? Meanwhile, there was a very interesting article over at moonofalabama.org. White House accepts reality regarding Syria. And it basically goes down all the issued statements about Syria going all the way back to early last year, and how every time the White House says this is what's going to happen, something different happens, and the White House will immediately change their statement saying, oh, well, this is what we're going to say happened now. In other words, they are not in control of the situation in Syria, but they're still trying to pretend they're somehow in control, either covertly or overtly. And Syria has been one foreign policy disaster after another. And now that the United Nations chemical weapons inspectors have themselves come back and said, we didn't actually find sarin there at that site for the August 21st attack, that whole idea, that whole claim by the U.S. that Assad used sarin on his own supporters has now collapsed completely. And it stands right next to that claim that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons as yet another lie by the United States government to sell you a war of conquest over what oil will be sold for, what piece of ink and paper other countries will be using into the far future. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing this article that came out of FTM Daily, where Washington eyes move by China to gain stronger foothold in oil-rich Iran. is causing concern. Because the United States needs Iran's oil to be sold for the dollar, not the yuan. That's what these wars are all about. Conquering the resource-rich areas of the planet, shackling them to the dollar, to the petrodollar, whatever dollar. And to force the world back onto Bretton Woods, where everybody is using the U.S. dollar for all international trade and banking. That's what the real agenda is here. And we've heard from the U.S. about how China's powerful manufacturing economy, they still know how to make things people want to buy, is a mortal threat to the U.S. dollar, which is held up with nothing but bluff, bluster, and absolute fraud. And that's why I'm so opposed to this policy, this return of the world to the petrodollar, this forcing the world back to Bretton Woods, inevitably will bring about conflict with Russia and China. The U.S. wants a state of war with China, even if China can't defeat us, even if we can't defeat China. If there's a state of war with China, then all of America's allies have to stop using the yuan and go back loyally to the U.S. dollar. That's the goal. We could wind up in a war with China that drags on half a century, like the war between the two Koreas has. And there'll be an armistice and a ceasefire, but there'll be a permanent state of war with China, and everybody has to do business with the United States of America. That's what's going on here. Over in Afghanistan, apparently John McCain has waded in, warning Hamid Karzai of dire consequences if Karzai will not sign that deal to allow American forces to stay in Afghanistan. Now, Karzai's out of office imminently, only a few weeks left. But they're trying to get Karzai to sign this deal that will commit the incoming government to allow America to stay inside Afghanistan, and Karzai doesn't want to do that. Another story that we got off of antiwar.com, where the latest U.S. ultimatum threat has failed, and the Afghan troop deal remains unsigned at this point. The problem is, if you look at this whole war agenda from the point of view of being all about the petrodollar and Bretton Woods, and you look at how it's going, it's already failing and falling apart. Nations are leaving the dollar and going to the yuan faster than the U.S. can conquer them. We are way too early in this program to be suffering these kinds of failures, which means in the long run, the U.S. is going to lose this. Even if it goes nuclear, they're going to lose this. But they've got all their bunkers and prepper activities and everything, so that's okay with them. We'll come out in 20 years and the planet will be free of you icky-poo, global warming causing humans, and it will be beautiful. Going to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and some commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Craig is still in the room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And I want to spend some time talking about the National Security Agency, because I think if there is one major aspect of the year 2013, it was the year that Americans woke up to the realization that their government really isn't very nice, and it certainly is not constitutional. Now, you remember that part in the Declaration of Independence, founding principle of this nation. Governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. I don't consent to be spied on and peeked at for purely gratuitous reasons by anybody in the government or corporations. And the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution makes it very clear. The government cannot intrude into your personal affairs, absent an actual accusation of criminal act supported by evidence or oath or affirmation. Somebody has to say, I saw that guy tap dancing barefoot on shag carpeting in defiance of whatever law we're in defiance of when we do that sort of thing. Only then can the government come in and start issuing warrants that say the police now have the authority to look at XYZ. Anything else is unconstitutional and delegitimizes the government. Now, over the New Year's holiday, Der Spiegel out in Germany acquired from the Edward Snowden leaks and published this little spy tech catalog of all the little goodies the U.S. government has built at taxpayer expense to use to spy on everybody. And it is just incredibly sweeping. It hammers home the fact everything is backdoored now. Everything is backdoored. Windows is backdoored. Macintosh, OS X is backdoored. Linux is backdoored. Your smartphones and tablets and everything are your routers are backdoored. And in there was the revelation that the NSA has complete control of your iPhone. They can load anything onto it they want, maybe plant some child porn, get you arrested. They can activate the microphone and the camera without you knowing, which is why every night I leave my iPhone sitting on an AM radio tuned to the local Bible Banger station. All of this is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It is tyranny, it is dictatorship. Apple is taking the position, we have no idea. We certainly didn't help them do that. Then Apple turns around and bans an encrypted text app for the iPhone that a developer wanted to put up on the iTunes store, and Apple said, no, you can't have that. Of course Apple cooperated. Just like Microsoft cooperated back with the NSA key. And they tried to cover it up by saying, well, just because it says NSA key doesn't mean it's an NSA key. It stands for Norman's Systems Advantage. That's what it stands for. And, of course, behind all of that is the fact that the NSA scandal is hammering the U.S. economy. And I notice the stock market isn't doing all that well today either. Because other countries around the world are moving away from U.S.-based cloud systems, U.S.-based ISPs. Anything connected with the United States is now presumed to be compromised. And it is costing these IT companies that went along with this spy program billions and billions of dollars. You wait. There's going to be a call for a taxpayer bailout for all these computer companies that went along with the unconstitutional and illegal activities of the NSA. Now they're suffering financial harm. We, the taxpayers, have to bail them out. No, we don't. Let them go out of business. Teach them an object lesson for the future. Your business, whatever it is, depends on the American people. And when you anger us, when you betray us, when you betray the Constitution, you will pay for it. Basically, the NSA shot America's IT industry in the head with this. Nobody wants American products anymore. It's a boom time for services and products being made in other countries outside U.S. influence. They can't keep them on the shelves over there. They're unloading those things from the truck. I mean, this is going to be the absolute last iPhone I ever own. I'm going to be looking for something. Actually, I'm going to go back to a couple of Dixie cups and a wax string. Craig in the control room said I got a Faraday cage for the phone, which actually you can do. One of our previous advertisers and guest on the show was Mike Nash, who makes these privacy cases. They're metal cases for the iPhone that are absolutely radio impermeable. If you put your phone in the case and shut it, it is cut off from the world. NSA can't get to your microphone. They can't get to your camera. They can't get to your GPS data. And if you need to be someplace where you don't want the NSA to know that you're there, like stopping off at the stripper bar on the way home, or at the bakery to have yourself a big eclair, even though you're supposed to be on a diet for the New Year's, you just throw it in there and you're invisible for that short amount of time. And Mike sent both my wife and I some of these cases. They are very sturdy and durable. So it's also a good way to protect your phones as well. Apparently, if you just wrap a certain number of layers of aluminum foil around your phone, it's cut off. Now, obviously, it means you can't get phone calls. But right now, it is incumbent on the American people to be prepared to sever themselves from this electronic spy grid when they need to not be tracked. Simply as a matter of constitutional principle that it is none of the government's business if I am stopping at the bakery for a jelly donut, even though I'm on a diet. It is none of their business. They have no right to know that. They have no right to look at pictures I have taken of my lovely wife in various states of undress. They have no right to look at my plans for possible business ventures to steal and give to their cronies. They do not have that right. They have no right in my private life or yours until you are actually suspected of a crime. Which brings me to my fourth NSA challenge, which expired on New Year's Day, and as promised, I did post the original clear message, which was a JPEG that made a political statement, and the original key, which was a bitmap of a painting by Vincent van Gogh. And I posted an enhanced version of the source code, which makes a brute force attack on messages that much more challenging. And the goal of this, the reason I put out the source code, and the source code is in the public domain. I am giving it to everybody out there for non-commercial use, because if anybody uses it commercially, we may presume the NSA is going to come in and say, backdoor it. But the source code is in the public domain for you to take and adapt and use for your own private message traffic. And in all four of the challenges, and I'm already working on the fifth, NSA has not been able to crack these once. And it stands to reason they would want to discourage people from developing their own encryption. To say, see, you really can't do it. We can still read your message. Just like right now with all the negative publicity, the NSA would love some positive publicity to show that they're actually of some use to the American people by going out and finding the crypto locker people, finding those who broke into Target, got all of that credit card information. Now there's been another break-in at one of the social media sites. If NSA were to grab those guys and get them arrested, everybody would say, all right, well, the NSA is spying on us, but at least they're doing something good. But they haven't. And the reason they haven't is they can't, because real criminals and real terrorists and any American citizen living by the Fourth Amendment principles is able to evade and keep their communications secret from the NSA. And that is the lesson of these challenges. The only way the NSA is able to read all of your messages is they've backdoored everything. And when you step outside of using the approved off-the-shelf encryption, the NSA is deaf, dumb, and blind. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, of course, 2014 is an election year. And they're already out there campaigning and positioning and trying to basically create issues that they can run on and win on. And they're basically trying to make the issues that are going to sink their career go away. And good luck on that one. We know that Obama is already trying to distance himself from the NSA scandal by pointing out it's been going on a long time. And he is correct on that. We know that this kind of interception, this violation of your Fourth Amendment right to privacy has been going on at least back to the 1980s in a program called Echelon, where they evaded the privacy laws of their country by spying on each other's nations and then trading the data. It's a technicality, but the end result was they were still looking into your personal affairs without your permission, without probable cause, and certainly without a warrant. And so in December, we were hearing how the Obama administration had prevailed on the appropriate parties to start releasing documents on surveillance of the American people from the Bush administration. Ooh, it's the Republicans were doing that. And now we're seeing this story today where the ACLU has filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit for the Reagan executive order on the surveillance of Americans. Now, silly me, I thought presidential executive orders were supposed to go on the Federal Register and be a public record, but apparently not. Apparently there are presidential executive orders, which, by the way, those are also unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the president the right to issue an executive order other than as for the purpose of implementing the will of the Congress, which in turn is supposed to be implementing the will of we the American people. But I digress. But very obviously these liberal organizations are out there trying to put the onus for the NSA spying on all of you back on Bush and Reagan. And yes, they are complicit and guilty because every president has gone along with this all the way back to Project Echelon. And even before that. But what Obama cannot distance himself from is the fact that as President of the United States, he could have put it to an immediate stop. Just like as President of the United States of America, he could shut down Guantanamo and order all those wrongfully imprisoned prisoners to be released. So although Obama's campaign plan is to say these other presidents are all guilty for violating the Constitution and spying on you, he shares that guilt and he cannot get away from it. Now, obviously Obama's not going to run for office again. Although obviously Fox News was running a story earlier today that 2014 will be Obama's comeback. He's out there campaigning again even though he's got the job. The reality is that Obama has come to understand that between NSA spying, IRS gate, Benghazi gate, Obamacare especially, that Democrats are facing an uphill battle come November. And so Obama's going to try and win back the American people, their love and their trust and respect in order to allow the Democrats to at least hang on to what part of Congress they still have. Last month, the Democratic National Committee sent out a panicked email to Democrats across the country that no matter what, they should vote Democrat in November so that Congress doesn't have a Republican majority that could impeach the president. So they know it's being talked about. And I find it almost painful that I'm actually opposed to that idea, because if Obama is impeached, it puts Biden in the White House. And Biden never saw a war for Israel that he didn't like. But everybody's pointing the fingers and trying to drop the blame on other candidates, other presidents, other parties. It's the opposition. No, it isn't. It's everybody. They're all guilty of violating the Constitution of the United States of America. It's a systemic problem. It is a bipartisan problem. It's a bipartisan abuse of the Constitution. And arguing over whose neck deserves the tallest tree and the shortest rope, or who deserves more tar and feathers, is rather pointless. They are all equally guilty. They went along with it. They profited from it. Now, we're getting this story. It actually came in last week, but I want to go back to it. Judge Edward Corman of the Federal District Court for the Eastern District of New York has ruled the government does have a right to search your personal electronics at a border without probable cause. Now, he rationalized this very obvious violation of the Fourth Amendment by saying the plaintiffs didn't actually have standing because the probability that your electronics will be searched is so small that it really doesn't matter. And that's ridiculous. A single violation of the Fourth Amendment is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I was going to rip this judge, his honor, a new sphincter, but I discovered the New York Times that was reporting on this article had stopped comments. And if you read the comments that got through, you will understand why. Nobody's buying this. Now, apparently, what the judge was doing was reaffirming the policy of the Obama administration that constitutional protections do not apply within 100 miles of a national border. That means if you live within 100 miles of the Mexican border, if you live within 100 miles of the Canadian border, if you live within 100 miles of a border with an ocean, which means everybody in the state of Hawaii, Obama has decreed from on high the Constitution does not apply to you. Now, the president and judges do not have lawful authority to arbitrarily suspend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights anywhere in this country. To do so renders the administration, the government, the courts illegitimate. Remember, the authority of all these people, the president, the Congress, the courts, rests on the Constitution of the United States of America, and the federal government is lawful and legitimate only so long as it complies with the restrictions in that document. Now, a lot of people are saying, it's only 100 miles, it's not that big a deal, until you realize what percentage of the American people live near the coastlines. This declared by imperial edict Constitution-free zone encompasses many of our major cities, even Washington, D.C. And as I said, here in Hawaii, where we're all living within 100 miles of a beach, makes the entire state a Constitution-free zone. It's only 100 miles, who cares? What if it's 200 miles tomorrow, then 300, then 500? It's incrementalism. The president cannot suspend the Constitution anywhere in this country for any reason. certainly can't do it for no reason at all, which is what he's doing. He's saying, oh, we're going to say, yeah, you can search whatever you want within 100 miles of the border. And to show you how desperate they are to try and get rid of what's left of the Constitution, there's a story coming out of the Rutherford Institute. This involves a Supreme Court case, Quinn versus State of Texas, where the lower courts ruled that an exercise of your Second Amendment rights is grounds to invalidate your Fourth Amendment protections. In other words, if you own a legally owned firearm, that automatically abrogates your Fourth Amendment rights. It's ridiculous to even suggest there's a linkage. But that's what they're trying to take to the United States Supreme Court right now. And I want to make a point here right now. The judicial branch of the U.S. federal government is empowered by the Constitution to tell the government what is constitutional and what is not. We, the people, are not obligated to listen to their rulings, especially if they're not constitutional. Now, early in our nation's history, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling called Marbury versus Madison, which stated laws repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. We don't have to rely on a judge to tell us. It is up to we, the people, to decide for ourselves if what the government is doing is constitutional or not. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab a quick phone call here. Joel in Seattle. Aloha, Joel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing great.
All right. I had a couple of subjects here. One is about Obamacare. Like, how can I escape it if it's attacked?
Well, in theory, if you do not sign up under Obamacare, the Internal Revenue Service will withhold a penalty from your tax refund. So if you adjust your withholding to the point where you're not going to be due a refund, I'm not sure what's going to happen. But the bottom line is at some point they're going to come up with something else to try and force people into this situation, especially with it being a disaster. They've got maybe 1 million people signed up, not all of whom actually have health insurance yet because of system problems. They've had about 6.5 million policies canceled. The situation for health insurance in this country is now far worse than before Obamacare, but Obamacare is all about funneling more money into those health insurance companies, and they will return a piece of the action to the government as taxes, and this government is so desperate for that money, they're going to keep this thing going no matter how bad it is for Americans, and I think from all of this attempt by the hired public relations shills all over the websites regarding this trapped ship in Antarctica, they're still trying to push global warming even in the middle of another record winter, and that's why I'm predicting that as soon as the snow starts to melt, Obama's going to hit us with a carbon tax.
Yeah, probably. Remember 9/11?
Vividly.
Yeah. And the planes hitting the World Trade Center about 100 times. You could see that video 1,000 times, basically. Why didn't they show the planes hitting the Pentagon the same amount of times?
Well, there are supposedly videos that do show it.
Where are those videos?
The FBI confiscated them all, and they remain classified. Because hey, my show. Okay. The reason is they knew that people were going to doubt the official story, and they wanted to set up a poison the well opportunity, which is where that whole no plane at the Pentagon nonsense came from. They were trying to get everybody to go into it, and then at some point when they got enough of the bloggers and the independent media to sign on to say there was no plane at the Pentagon, then they would release the video and say, oh, look at all those idiots over there in the independent media, how wrong they were. Really, you should go back to trusting the American corporate media to tell you what you need to think this week. Fortunately, though, they were never able to get a majority of the independent media to sign on to that idea, mostly because there were too many people who saw that plane flying toward the Pentagon and nobody saw it flying away. And virtually every argument put forward for this no-plane nonsense has already been discredited. Yes, there's wreckage in the building. In fact, I'll put up my own story about it. It's called the Pod People and the No-Plane Theory. But you need to understand, the government loves to play dirty. If they cannot win an argument with facts, law, and logic, they will poison the well. They'll plant nonsensical stuff. They have no set of rules other than to win in the end. And you need to be aware that they will lie. I mean, look at Saddam's nuclear weapons, how blatantly they lied to you about that. Look at the claim that Assad used sarin gas August 21st on his own people. That one's completely crumbled. There is nothing coming out of this government and the corporate media that should be taken at face value. And because they can't start telling the truth now without destroying themselves, their only other option is to look for ways to discredit the independent media. And they put out this stuff hoping that we'll bite so that they can come back and say, oh, look how wrong they were, and that will be the end of it. But again, we're wise to their tricks. Now then, getting back to the whole NSA getting into your equipment, there was a very interesting article over at Wired that if you want to keep your laptop from being tampered with, use glitter nail polish. And I think they chose that because everybody goes, glitter nail polish, what's that? But what they're basically saying is if you have a laptop that you might want to just put something across the seams where the unit comes apart when you're traveling and you don't have the machine in your actual possession. I mean, I always carry mine as carry-on. Put stickers so that if somebody gets into your machine, it's immediately obvious they have done so. Now, this, of course, won't protect you from the recently acknowledged program where the NSA will intercept computers bought online to plant malware and devices and then let them go on to their destination, which is a good reason to stop buying computers online and go on down and buy them from your local store off the shelf, or even better, start buying older machines without Wi-Fi at yard sales and so forth. But, I mean, people are starting to think along these terms. We know the government is spying on us. We have to take steps to protect our privacy. And I'm not talking about protecting terrorists or criminals, because we already know the NSA can't find them anyway. I'm talking about what happened up at the Seattle APEC conference, where U.S. government intelligence agencies on taxpayer payroll were caught stealing business secrets, economic information, contract bids, other information from conference attendees to give to Clinton's political cronies. They've been doing it all along. If you're a small businessman and you've got a new product idea and you have it on your laptop, it is fair game for somebody in the NSA to steal and call up their buddy and say, hey, I got a great idea for your business. You need to move fast. This other guy's going to be out there in 2 weeks. And the buddy says, well, I can be out there in 1 week. It does go on. They are looking at your pictures of your lovers on your machines. They keep getting caught at it time and time and time again. And the real problem is that all of these backdoors that the NSA has put into all of this equipment are being discovered by the real computer criminals and then used against you. So far from making the American people much safer, the NSA has made us wide open to computer criminals. For all we know, Target had all that credit card information stolen using the NSA's backdoors into their computers. That'd be a reason for the NSA to shut up about it. All of these new electronics make your lives much more open, make you a victim. There's apparently a new flood of these electronic gadgets in the hands of car thieves that are able to exploit the radio signal from your key fob, where they can just unlock your car remotely, take whatever's in there, close the car back up, no sign it's been broken into, but all your stuff is gone. The answer from the police is, well, don't leave anything valuable in your car. My answer is, when you buy a new car or a used car, get one without that key fob. Now, I'm driving this wonderful little 14-year-old Honda, and I love it. It's showing its age. At some point, I'm going to have to buy a newer car. I'm not going to get one with Wi-Fi. I'm not going to get one with electronic, computerized, whatever. I'm not going to get one with a key fob. I want just engine, powertrain, place to sit, steering wheel, brakes. I'll drive the car myself. I don't want cruise control or traction control. It's one thing that Jeremy Clarkson at Top Gear and I absolutely agree about. I don't want a computer driving my car. I will drive it myself. When that Xterra blew up and I had to rent a car while we were looking to get the Honda that we have now, it had traction control. And when I was driving it, it always felt like I was on the urge of spinning out. So I had to keep turning it off. Of course, it was on by default here. All righty, let's see. We're going to take a phone call here. Bill in Texas. Aloha. Bill, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you very much. This was several years ago, 4 years ago. I called up the Austin American-Statesman newspaper and had my credit card standing by, and I wanted to put in a legal notice stating the fact that under Supreme Court ruling that you referred to about, if it's unconstitutional, it's automatically null and void. Mm-hmm. And I had the actual name of, the number of the law for the Patriot Act, enlisted Patriot Act, and the paper refused to put that in legal notice. Imagine my shock. I'm appalled. I mean, absolutely. We know the corporate media is completely compromised. They're going to. In fact, we just coming up to Christmas, we had that wonderful video from Conan O'Brien's show, where he just had all these clips from all these small market news stations across the country saying the same message, word for word for word. It tells you it's all scripted, it's all controlled. The corporate media is there to sell you things. The new antiperspirant, the new car, the new gizmo, the new policy, the new tax, the new incursion into your constitutional rights. That's their job. It's legal for the corporate media to lie to you. It's legal for the corporate media management to fire reporters who refuse to lie. That's got to tell you something right there. We got to take a break for some commercials. Thank you for the call, Bill.
Well, that's all I had. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I think we have a caller on the line. No, we finished up with that call here. The reality is, in the hard economic times, a lot of people are turning to crime, and everyone's talking about key fob, not key fob. Even without the key fob, a lot of thievery going on. When we still had that Xterra, somebody literally stole the spare tire off the back, and one of our other neighbors, who's got a very, very nice pickup truck, thieves literally came and stole the taillight assemblies out of the back. I guess either they had the same truck, didn't want to pay the $130 to replace the taillight assemblies. But there's a lot of stuff going on there. Are the police doing anything about it? Of course not. They're too busy out there writing traffic tickets, which are revenue generating. They're out there harassing the Occupy protesters. Craig is telling me that a friend of his had a tailgate stolen off of his truck. I understand in a lot of communities where the police presence has been cut for budgetary reasons, they're starting to form their own vigilante groups. And I understand how that would happen. Put on the sheriff's badge and go out there and say, all right, police aren't here, but we are. And we are deputized by the local population to enforce the laws around here. And we catch you stealing something from a car, we're going to hang you right there from the tree. You get a few thieves hanging from the local trees, and I'll bet you crime's going to go down. It really will. I mean, our system doesn't stop crime. Our system needs crime. Our system needs criminals out there in the street to make you be afraid, so you'll run back to Daddy Government, save us, save us, save us, and they'll arrest a token number of the criminals, put them in jail, where they learn better ways to be criminals from the other criminals, come right back on out. Anyway, I want to jump down in my talking points. This was a little bit further down, but because we've got a guest coming in at the top of the hour, I wanted to hit these because they've been sort of piling up. And I'm going to start here with a story. A lady named Connie Villa, 35 years old, had recently been put on prescription antidepressants, and on Christmas Day tried to poison her family. And one of her children did die, so she's in prison now for that murder. Now, interestingly enough, only the first report of this story mentioned that she'd recently started on prescription antidepressants. All subsequent versions of the story, that reference has been deleted because we can't have anything in the corporate media that makes our advertisers unhappy. We were talking last week about these other stories where this Connecticut man stabbed his mother to death and then slashed open her body claiming he was looking for a baby. We're seeing more and more of these very bizarre crimes coming out here. Teenager cut off a man's head as a Christmas present to his aunt. We need to find out what medications these people were on. By the way, speaking of medications, the psychiatrist who treated Adam Lanza had surrendered his license months before the Newtown massacre. He's now living down in New Zealand. Apparently, he was facing allegations of misconduct, possible boundary violations with a patient. In other words, he was having a relationship with one of his patients. These are not good people. They're there for the money. They're there to peddle the products. And it's a tragic, tragic story. And we need to keep our eye on the fact that our government is so into tax revenues and corporate profitability, they will allow dangerous medications and products to be sold to you. Apparently a whole bunch of Gardasil, 743,000 vials had to be recalled because the vials contain tiny shards of glass, which is something you don't want to inject into your sons and daughters. Another interesting article from naturalblaze.com pointing out that doctors are financially rewarded. The hospitals they work at receive financial inducements to administer the flu shots. They're being paid to push these medications. They get a kickback. The Gardasil shots are something like $300 each. And the hospital or the doctor that's administering them gets half of that. So, of course, they're going to stick that needle in anything that moves. Now, getting back up here to the top of the talking points, there's been yet another incident. This is in Holly Hill, Florida. Police showed up at the wrong house looking for a prostitute named Josie Bobbitt. They wanted to serve a warrant on her. The homeowner said she does not live here. The police, even though they had the wrong house, were determined to serve that warrant, went into the backyard. The dogs back there, of course, saw it as an intrusion, and the police shot the dog. And the police response to that was, "Don't worry, we'll pay to buy you a new dog. That'll make everything okay." They had the wrong house. When these things happen, when mistakes are made, remember, since 9/11, the police departments of the United States of America have murdered 8 times as many innocent civilians as terrorists have. We should not allow the police to be bought out of trouble by making the taxpayers pay for it, by having the money come out of the city budget or the county budget or the state budget. The police should be held personally, financially liable or criminally liable for committing these crimes. Remember, the police are lawful authority only when they themselves are in compliance with the law. If they act illegally, they should go to jail just like anybody else. By the way, there's a new alarming trend. Saw this story over at American Free Press, where people who call 911 over an emergency and the police arrive at the emergency and get injured are now suing the callers for not adequately warning them what they might encounter. Now, aren't the police being trained to deal with these situations? Apparently not. Apparently, if you call up 911 and say, "My husband is slapping me around," and the police show up and your husband, who happens to be a black belt, kicks the police around, they can sue the wife because, hey, you didn't say he was a black belt. It's just nonsense stuff. Apparently, the New York City Air Museum has acquired one of the F-35 fighters because nobody else wants them. Somebody wrote an article after inspecting the planes saying that along with all the other aircraft failings, the headrest for the pilot, which is designed to take that computerized helmet control fire system, which still doesn't work, the headrest is so wide, the pilots can't actually look to the rear to see if anybody's on their tail. They can't check 6. It's a failing of a lot of the stealth aircraft. And we'd commented on that before, that the way the plane was built, in a traditional gun-on-gun dogfight, the F-35 is at a disadvantage. Our current military procurement is repeating the mistake they made with the F-4 Phantom during Vietnam days, where they said, our new wonder weapons, our missiles and everything will carry the battle of the enemy. We don't need a cannon inside the F-4. And the F-4 Phantom was built without a cannon, without a machine gun. And the kill ratio in Vietnam went down because it turned out those air-to-air missiles were easy to evade by an oncoming aircraft who would then get on the tail of the F-4 and shoot it down. Now, they belatedly added a gun pod underneath the F-4 to bring back that capability. But they're making the same mistake again, and I can think of no better example than that Ticonderoga-class ship, which got struck by a drone that went right through its aluminum sheathing and burned up the entire computer center operating the spy radar. That's the reason they're talking about 6 months repair at a cost of $30 million. This little tiny drone didn't even have any kind of a warhead on it, punched right through the aluminum and destroyed basically the entire system to fight the ship. Because the designers of those ships are relying too much on their phalanx, close-in weapon systems, on their various missiles, and we already know other countries have developed weapons that can evade those systems, which leaves our current weapons hopelessly vulnerable for all the money we've spent on them. Got to take a break for Phyllis Schlafly and commercials. We'll be back with our guest, Mark Howitt, after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Dan the Man is now manning the console, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And joining us right now is Mark Howitt, the producer-director of a documentary we linked to some weeks back about the plethora of obvious problems and inconsistencies with the official story regarding Sandy Hook. And Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me on, Mike.
Well, again, I think the impression looking at your video was just the overwhelming abundance of problems with the official story. It isn't that you found 1 or 2 or 3 obvious logical contradictions. It's just that it went on and on and on and on and just hammered home the point. Something is wrong with that official story, underscoring the fact that it appears to be yet another one of these manufactured false flag hoaxes to scare Americans into surrendering their rights under the Second Amendment, to rely on government more to protect us from those evil people. And Mark, why don't you give us just a couple of the highlights, the major points that your video covers?
Sure. I've been making films since about 2009. 2010 is when I started making them, and it was basically just like YouTube documentaries, using clips that I found on YouTube, assembling them, and to try to present a story and to show the way that certain events are covered up by the media and stuff. And Sandy Hook was no exception. A lot of the viewers that were watching my documentary suggested that I cover the story, and they were really eager to watch my presentation of Sandy Hook. And one thing I find is really important to point out is when something like this happens, the best time to gather materials and to try to figure out what's going on is right away when the incident happens, so that you can be on top of the news, because a lot of times the news will report something and then later retract their story, or you'll find all sorts of anomalies with something as big as Sandy Hook or something in regards to that. So I was really busy collecting materials and stuff, and I wanted to present as much as I could in one shot, like you said. And one thing I found was the media definitely later retracted the story, and it just didn't make sense considering what I uncovered early on.
Well, there were a lot of contradictions early on, and you're absolutely right, because during those first few moments when the operations are underway, mistakes get made, things get reported that ought not to be. Remember in 9/11 how the BBC reported Building 7 had collapsed 26 minutes before it happened. But the longer you wait, the more the corporate media and the perpetrators of these false flags have to sort of polish the lie and say, this is the new official story, and that becomes the entrenched corporate history of the event. And it really is important at the very start of any of these things to just grab everything off the net you can and save it on your local machine, because that is where you're going to start finding where the official story is at least changing. And they're trying to cover up the inconsistencies. I remember The number of guns kept changing. The type of guns kept changing. They kept insisting that he had taken this long gun into the school. Then they found out the gun was actually in the trunk of the car. And I think it got really weird when they started just keeping everybody so far away from the school that nobody could see anything. And they're still doing that now that the school itself is being demolished. The demolition crew are all under non-disclosure agreements. They're covering up the fact that Adam Lanza was on these medications that may have made him more prone to do this or be talked into it. And we had this video, this amazing video of the assistant prosecutor for the Connecticut Medical Examiner's Office trying to block a Freedom of Information Act request for Adam Lanza's medication, saying that even if in this one case Adam Lanza was driven to this by his medication, that's not important for the public to know because they might stop taking their medications. Then when you go and look at how big a part of Connecticut's economy pharmaceuticals are, you will understand what's driving this whole issue. Let's blame the guns. The guns are bad. And, you know, the fact that there are so many of these mass shootings that seem to be committed by people either on or withdrawing from these medications, we don't talk about that because the advertisers will get upset.
Mm-hmm. And the media is also saying that Nancy Lanza, Adam's mother, was a gun toter and, you know, had lots of guns, and she was teaching her son how to shoot, and he was going to ranges. But there was independent reporters going around trying to find any records of this, and there wasn't any. They went to all the gun ranges everywhere. There was no records linking them to any shooting ranges. And if you recall, the media was saying that these people were gun lovers, and then obviously they were attacking the Second Amendment rights and stuff like that. So.
Anytime anything bad happens, that's the first thing they do is go after the Second Amendment. I think one point you made in your documentary was how initially we were being told that Nancy Lanza was a teacher at that school, and that's why her son went there. Then it came out that no, she wasn't a teacher there. They didn't know who he was. I mean, the story just kept flipping back and forth. And there was this one video clip where they literally had somebody standing up there and say, you know, don't pay any attention to any of this other information that's coming out on the web. Really, we will tell you what you need to know about this. They were afraid the story was breaking down around them.
Absolutely. And people were starting to see the anomalies, just like all the other things in the past, 9/11, JFK assassination, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X. You can go on through history for a long time, and they've been doing this. They've been shaping history and writing our history books by doing events like this, really. And right away, I wanted to mention, too, that Adam Lanza definitely does not seem to be the type that could pull off an operation like that. If you look at him, he's just a skinny kid who apparently nobody heard about for 3 years prior to the attacks. And there's all sorts of anomalies in regards to who is Adam Lanza. And I tried to point this out in my documentary, and even his death report. Early on, I managed to capture the screen showing that his date of death wasn't the date that they said he died. It was actually prior, indicating that he
another
died
one of the anomalies there, and there's no benign explanation for that. Information was being put up about the Sandy Hook Victims Fund, where the websites were established before the shooting actually happened. That was another thing that you had in there. And what's really amazing is, obviously, the people who put this kind of an operation together are still operating in the mindset at the height of the Cold War where they could get away with this kind of stuff. But it's a very different world. We know we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and you have to wonder what kind of arrogance that would cause people to try such a stunt today, knowing how skeptical the American people are now about anything coming out of the corporate media and the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And same thing is happening now with Syria, with the weapons that they claim that there was there. They're not finding anything. They're always going to do this to get into countries. Syria is one of the last remaining countries in that region that has its independence, I guess you could say, from the New World Order. Israel is expanding through Palestine. There's all sorts of, there's a history there of mass murder and genocide and bloodshed. And this is all part of their agenda to control the world through finances, resources, etc. They're pushing for a one world government system, one religion, one currency, essentially one of everything, a single source for everything. Big brother, I guess you could say.
Well, there is no question that all wars throughout history have been started with lies, fraud, and deception, because people don't want to go to war, and whatever world leader wants to initiate the war has to lie and trick their population into it to convince them there is no other choice. Whether it's LBJ claiming the Maddox was attacked by torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, whether it was President McKinley claiming that the USS Maine was blown up by a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Roosevelt claiming the attack on Pearl Harbor was a complete surprise, which we all know now, none of those things were true. Roosevelt goaded the Japanese into the attack and then pretended it was a complete surprise to get us into World War II. At this point, everyone understands the lies about Saddam's nuclear weapons were all about getting us into war with Iraq. Same thing with the Syrian weapons. And again, this Sandy Hook operation just seems so sloppy. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back here with Mark Howitt and his Sandy Hook documentary. I've just reposted it to the top of the main page at whatreallyhappened.com so you can look at it, watch it, save it locally, whatever. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Mark Howitt, producer-director of YouTube documentaries, and he has this amazing documentary out called Sandy Hook, The Real Truth. I have relinked it to the top of whatreallyhappened.com. It is a 3-hour-long tour de force of all the myriad reasons why this is obviously another manufactured fraud, to scare us out of our Second Amendment rights, to keep us emotionally, mentally dependent on the police and the government. And it clearly is a fraud. There are so many things wrong with this story. And Mark, in this last segment, you've heard the old phrase, in 25 words or less, and obviously we've got more than 25 words, but what are the major contradictions that are so obvious that people are going to say, yeah, there's a problem here with this story?
The multiple suspects that were detained and not discussed through the media, as well as the police audio anomalies. Anybody can download the police audio from that day and hear tons of information on there, as well as the car that Adam apparently drove up to the school. All 4 doors of the car were open. There was multiple jackets found around it, probably used to conceal the weapons bringing it in, which indicates that a small, fragile young man like Adam Lanza could not have brought in all the firearms and weaponry and clips and all the stuff that apparently he had in the school. The shooting was and the killing that they apparently claim happened was very precise, and it just, with the multiple suspects being detained outside of the school, running away after the shooting, the videos showing all this, the police audio proving this, it would be silly for somebody to think that, to believe the official story, I guess you could say.
Is one of the, I know the Sandy Hook audios were just allowed out recently, and apparently whoever was releasing them wasn't listening too carefully, because on one of them you can actually hear somebody in the background saying, what, this is all a hoax? And then the supervisor says, I need you to get off the phone right now. And again, there's no benign explanation for that. I think the fact that the car had all 4 doors open, it's very obvious Adam Lanza was not alone. He was just set up to be the fall guy and the patsy, the way the 2 kids at Columbine were, because there were multiple shooters there. I remember...
Yeah, and also James Holmes at Aurora, Colorado. Nobody saw him. His face, whoever was doing the shooting, was wearing a full suit of armor. You couldn't see any skin or facial recognition, nothing. And then there's multiple gas masks found on the scene. The police audio indicates there was multiple suspects that were never discussed. Eyewitnesses also said multiple suspects, just like at Sandy Hook. They had one of the people detained and put in the front seat of the police car at Sandy Hook. So that's kind of strange when you detain somebody who's running away from the scene of the shooting, and then later eyewitnesses are describing how he's sitting in the front seat of the police car. That goes to show that it's probably somebody who was on the inside, a black operation of sorts, somebody who was detained, who was very sloppy and got detained by the police. And later they couldn't talk about it because it was likely a national security measure.
Well, we know that these false flags tend to be very sloppy, and mistakes do happen because they're out there doing things that normally are not done. I think a classic case of that is that back on 9/11, Flight 93 was intended to crash into World Trade Center Building Number 7. When you look at the New York firefighters in the O'Day Brothers documentary 9/11, they have been told a third plane is headed toward the World Trade Center. Then, as near as we can tell, either the flight crew or the passengers regained control of Flight 93, and because the facts on the plane didn't match the official story, it had to be shot down. The wreckage was covering 8 miles of countryside, which tells us it came apart in midair. But they rely on the news to just say, oh no, this is what's going on, and pay no attention to all the obvious contradictions. I remember when BBC was challenged on the fact that they had reported Building 7's collapse 26 minutes before it happened, their only response is, well, we threw away all the original tapes, so we can't tell you what happened. Now, anybody who's worked in TV news understands that original tapes of major news events are a cash cow. You will make money off those tapes, licensing them year after year after year into the future. There is no way they would be thrown away. So, again, these operations are carried out not very carefully. They rely on the news media to convince America everything is okay. Looking back at the John F. Kennedy assassination, they made a lot of mistakes. And looking back at, for example, the magazines of the day, you can see the mistakes they made. You can see Oswald standing in the doorway of the book depository at street level just as Kennedy grabs his throat. But back then, we were all trusting. We believed the media when it said, oh, yes, it's this guy did it. Pay no attention to any other evidence, and Americans went along with it. But that was then, and this is now. And Americans are very skeptical, which is healthy for the American people to be. And it just boggles the imagination that whoever is arranging and orchestrating these things somehow is still living in that dream world of the glorious days of the Cold War where they think they can get away with this kind of stuff. Because clearly they can't. Your documentary proves that. My website proves that.
Yeah, and that documentary is called, the one that I made is called Sandy Hook, the documentary. But due to YouTube deleting it off of the page and suppressing my account, now I'm only able to upload videos that are 15 minutes or less in length. So they've totally cut me off on YouTube now from making any further documentaries and posting them full length anyways. So basically what's happened there is other people have copied the video and posted it on their page, and now it has different names, like Sandy Hook, The Truth Exposed, I think is what you called it earlier. But it's actually called Sandy Hook, the documentary.
Now, I want to back up
called
here.
That on my page, and
well, first of all, can you give us your web page for our listeners to visit?
Well, I have a show. After Sandy Hook, I started doing broadcasts myself to try to cover some news stories and stuff, and you can check that out at unveilingthetruth.com. And there's a link to my YouTube channel on there, as well as a link to the documentaries that are still available on there. But they are slowly taking down my videos and totally suppressing me. They don't want me making videos like this because it definitely, it's like you said, it's a cash cow of information on what really happened. And I plan on making one on the Boston bombing this year. Since
there's a lot of good information on that one. A lot of,
yeah.
You know, I mean,
and there's also an author named Ole Damagord who wrote a very good book on Operation 40, the JFK assassination, and how it's linked to all these other groups. So I do plan on working with him, if possible, to make a film about his book and his research, 30 years of research in regards to the black ops that exist in government and their ties to the mafia, organized crime, the royal family, CIA, and all these major events that are happening where it's always the lone killer and the media just paints a picture for us to believe. So it'll be a very interesting year, I think, for what I plan on doing there.
Well, good for you. I am absolutely, well, I guess I'm not surprised that YouTube did that. I mean, normally YouTube, when you have a channel and you post so many videos, they'll make it possible for you to do longer and longer videos. This is the first time I've ever heard of YouTube literally taking somebody with an established track record of producing these videos and all of a sudden arbitrarily saying no more than 50 minutes in length. But again, we know all these online corporations are working hand in glove with the NSA, and I can understand why certainly they don't want this Sandy Hook video to get out, because it isn't just you found a few inconsistencies in the story. It is an overwhelming flood of problems with that official story that just hammers home the point this was another false flag operation. We're coming up on the end of the segment. I'm going to have to let you go. Anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Just be aware of what's going on, and like I said earlier in the broadcast, when something like this happens, be sure to check out the news. Try to save as much video and information as you can right away, because you'll find some really good stuff there that won't be discussed later on.
Okay.
And anybody who wants to check out Virtue videos, check out unveilingthetruth.com.
We've got to let you go. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last half hour of our first show of 2014. And we're going to go right to the phones. Dan in Oregon. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, thank you for accepting the call. I wanted to get a quick question into your guest, but, time did not allow.
Okay.
But anyways, the question I wanted to ask was this. Who's paying for the new school? I mean, in any other school shootings, they never tore down the school building and built a new one, even Columbine. So I'm wondering, where the community is getting the money to build the new school when, in fact, the old one is in pretty decent shape. So that's my question.
Well, you're absolutely right. The school was in excellent shape. It did not need to be demolished. The only reason to demolish it is to guarantee that nobody can go and take a look at the facts enshrined in the bullet holes in the walls. The same reason they bulldozed the compound, the church compound down in Waco, Texas, following that whole disaster. They literally bulldozed that site 6 inches down, took all the material away, buried it in an undisclosed site. Same thing when they demolished the remains of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. And they brought it on down, all the debris taken away, buried in an undisclosed location. They did that in Fort Marcy Park, following the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster and the attempt to make it look like a suicide. The FBI, during their, you'll pardon the expression, investigation, literally bulldozed that whole area where his body had been found and moved around all the monuments to make it impossible for anybody to go back in and look for any trace evidence that might remain. That's the only reason to tear down the Sandy Hook School, to make sure that there is no possibility of finding any physical evidence that contradicts the official story. And I'm sure that the school district has received a very generous grant, either from the government or some other party, to pay for the cost of all of this.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. All righty, let's see. The corporate media is reporting on the heavy storms that are paralyzing traffic all across the Midwest and the Northeast. It's actually very cool and windy here, even for this time of year here in Hawaii. Interesting story came out. This was a YouTube video, and it's talking about a trend in California. Now, we have been hearing from the carbonazis and the environmentalists how we should all develop our own power. We should be self-powering and take the strain off fossil fuels, but we understand that the corporations that provide our services don't want that to happen. Out here in Hawaii, solar has become so successful that the Hawaii Electric Company is now trying to find ways to slow the trend down. And there's this story coming out of California where people who are living way, way off in the remote areas where there is no electrical or water hookups are now being told they have to pay to run wires all the way from their home to the nearest part of the power grid at a cost of something like $100,000. To get electricity they don't need because they've got windmills and solar. And if they refuse to spend the money to hook their homes to the grid, they're declared a nuisance. And their homes they can be kicked off their property, have their property seized and demolished by the nuisance abatement team. So for all the talk about energy independence, they're trying to keep you dependent. Anybody trying to live disconnected, off the grid, is being attacked right now. They want you dependent because dependency is slavery. Dependent on the electric company for your power. Dependent on petroleum for your energy. Dependent on the food corporations and supermarkets for your food. Dependent on the corporate media for your information and news. Dependent on big pharmaceutical companies for your medical care. They don't want you to be independent. Any more than King George III wanted the American colonists to be independent. Dependency is how they keep control. In their latest effort to try and prove that they are actually still valid or relevant in society, the FBI is now warning police nationwide to be on the alert for people carrying the Old Farmer's Almanac, because it could be used for terrorist planning. That's their latest thing. You know, I mean, they've been talking about, if they talk about the Constitution, they're a potential terrorist. That's been for years and years. But now they're saying if you've got the Old Farmer's Almanac, you might be a terrorist. It's starting to sound like a sick Jeff Foxworthy joke. If you have the Old Farmer's Almanac, you might be a terrorist. If you believe in the Constitution, you might be a terrorist. Now, I'm a farm kid. I grew up in New England farming country, and I know the Old Farmer's Almanac very well. There is nothing in there that could be used to plan terror attacks. It's all about planting and seeds and fertilization. There's weather trends. There's lists of abbreviations of state agencies. It's just a general collection of useful information all in one cover, and it's a very nice book to have. Now, their weather forecasts are not day to day to day. They're general trends over the space of months, and they tend to be very, very accurate. And by the way, the Old Farmer's Almanac is saying it's going to be a very hard, cold winter. But for some reason, the FBI, trying to prove that they're still in control of the terrorist problem in the United States, is now telling police, if you see somebody carrying the Old Farmer's Almanac, they might be a potential terrorist, which is kind of weird because they sell that over at the local Safeway. Because a lot of people here in Hawaii are into gardening. And a lot of them are growing vegetable gardens right now. And you can go down to our local Safeway. It's right on the magazine rack by the checkout counter right next to Time and all the other propaganda magazines. But if you buy it and the police see you carrying it, you're on that list as a terror suspect. What they're trying to do is create a situation where everybody is a terrorist suspect for some reason so they don't have to worry about the Constitution anymore. What do you mean, Fourth Amendment? You're a terror suspect. Of course we can look into your phone calls. That's what they're trying to do. And the old Soviet Union used to do exactly the same thing. Everybody was suspected of something, which made it okay for the GRU and the KGB to basically go on out and abuse people. Same thing in East Germany with the Stasi. Everybody was suspected of something that made it okay for the police to be spying on everyone. We're going to take a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Happy New Year, Mike. I bought some extra pyrotechnics to detonate on New Year at the strike of midnight.
Good for you.
So I started you and Claire. But the thing about the Farmer's Almanac. The thing is, if you look at the FBI handbook, even carrying a Klingon linguistic book from Star Trek is a terrorist paraphernalia item.
Okay.
I'm serious. I'm learning how to speak Klingon.
I think the only possible rationale for that is they don't want you speaking a language they themselves cannot speak, which I guess would extend to if you've got some of these, Rosetta Stone discs to learn Chinese, which is probably a good idea right about now. The same rationale could apply. But if you step back and look at it, it's absurd. All these reasons to think somebody's a terror suspect. They're just trying to paint a wide brush across all the law-abiding American citizens in order to rationalize the discarding of constitutional rights.
Well, I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if they say people carrying Women's Day and Family Circle and People Magazine are a terrorist suspect.
Oh, I'm sure if you're carrying People Magazine, they view you as a loyal, patriotic citizen because you're not muddying up your head with all that alternative media stuff. You're reading the important stuff about celebrities.
Well, but the thing is, I just don't see this lasting for long. I just don't see it lasting. Because, the thing is, I said I posted something on my Facebook, and that was, I'd rather go through Russian customs entering the country than go through a security checkpoint at Times Square to go see the ball drop. And I got a bunch of likes and a bunch of comments because a bunch of people, went out of the country, came back in, and, they even went through Times Square to a checkpoint, and they know what they mean. I said, I won't go to Times Square if I have to go through these checkpoints.
No, people are staying away from these events. Apparently, they still have something like 5,000 tickets unsold for the upcoming Indianapolis race. because people don't want to subject themselves to that. They're harming the businesses. Tourism here in Hawaii has just been hammered ever since TSA started their crotch-groping tactics. It's harming. We have an economy that is already hovering at the edge of collapse, and we've got TSA destroying tourism. NSA is destroying our domestic IT services and products. All of this enhanced security and groping is destroying public events like sporting events and conventions. Nobody wants to be bothered anymore with this stuff. And it's harming an already weak economy, and nobody seems to have any common sense in Washington, D.C., that it has, in fact, gone too far. George, I got to let you go. We got a commercial break. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Well, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. The American stock market didn't have a really good day today. That'll get everybody thinking going into the week here, or into next week, rather. The disaster sirens here on the island of Oahu just sounded off during that commercial break. Of course, every first of the month at this time, they test them, and since yesterday was New Year's Day, they pushed this test into one day later here on January 2nd, which I probably, the Secret Service over there with Obama dropped their coffee when they heard that one go off. Their nerves are probably already on edge after all the fireworks that we had on New Year's, because I don't think they were expecting that. Anyway, speaking of the federal government and preparations here, interesting story. And I had the link right over to the federal government's website for putting out tenders for procurement, which is a fancy way of saying I want to buy something. And the government has now ordered 14 million potassium iodide tablets to be delivered in a month. And this is going to the Department of Health and Human Services. And the question is, are they expecting a nuclear war someplace? Or are they expecting more problems from Fukushima, which continues to just emit steam? TEPCO has now drilled holes through the walls of those reactors and confirmed that much of the fuel assemblies are missing. They're not missing. We know where they are. They're down in the ground. And at some point, they're going to hit the water table, and that's when it's going to get really, really ugly. Apparently, Merck put out a pharmaceutical for the cattle industry called Zilmax. And apparently they've finally been forced to halt the sales after cattle started losing their hooves, which is a terrible thing for a cow. And cattle were outright dying. Basically, they're saying that the cattle's feet were basically coming apart, literally just falling apart from this medication. Another story from the Daily Sheeple. 8 babies in China have died in the last 2 months shortly after being injected with the hepatitis B vaccine. This was reported in the New York Times. And the deaths are being linked to vaccine manufacturer Kangtai Biological Products. Kangtai is saying, it's just a coincidence they died after taking our vaccine. We talked earlier in the show about how 700,000 vials of Gardasil have been recalled because they contain tiny shards of glass. They're just going crazy with this stuff. Apparently, the United States agricultural farming industries are using 40 tons of antibiotics every single day to grow food. As they crowd more and more animals into these very tight factory farms, they have to keep them pumped up on antibiotics to prevent disease from wiping out the entire crops. As a result, we're starting to see antibiotic-resistant diseases show up in these animals. And, of course, these pharmaceuticals, if they are not fully and completely metabolized by the animal prior to harvesting, you wind up eating that stuff. Another story coming out, this was a YouTube video. Jerry Rossman, pig farmer in Iowa, was cultivating GMO corn, Roundup ready, BT ready, and he fed the corn to his pigs. After 1 year, all of his pigs are sterile. They cannot reproduce. Meanwhile, there is a lobbyist group that was lobbying against GMO labeling that has been sued for refusing to release the list of funders that supported them. Now, anybody who's got a lobbying group, public interest group, the funding is supposed to be public information. And the group, the Grocery Manufacturer Association, put millions of dollars into the fight against Washington's Initiative 522 to mandate GMO labeling. The Grocer Manufacturer Association is hiding where that money came from, refuses to release it. It's completely illegal. They're obviously protecting somebody, and now they're being sued for that here. Oh, my goodness here. Interesting story I found, and I posted it to the website a few days ago. A flashback. Back in the 1930s, at the height of the American eugenics movement, and remember, Hitler's program for eugenics, for racial hygiene, was modeled on American programs of the decade before. You're not supposed to remember that because Hitler eugenics bad, but our country was very much into it. The Rockefeller Foundation put forward a plan for the government to determine which Americans were fit to reproduce, and all others would be sterilized. An attempt to control human breeding, who are fit to reproduce. Well, I can tell you where that's going to fall apart right now. If only the rich and powerful are fit to breed, then in the following generation, those offspring of the rich and powerful are going to be in trouble because they forgot to include plumbers and electricians and mechanics on that list of people fit to reproduce. Interesting story over in Ireland. The number of atheists in Ireland has increased by 400% over the last 10 years. They're saying the massive increase is due to a huge breakdown in trust between the Catholic Church and many of its traditional constituencies, which is, it's kind of hard to reconcile the priests diddling the little kiddies with their claim to represent the supreme moral authority of the universe. It's a real obvious contradiction there. Now, a lot of people are hoping that the new Pope, Francis, is going to restore faith and trust in the Catholic Church. Unfortunately, he's already waffling back and forth on some of the issues he's talking about. He certainly does not seem to have yet taken a strong stance against all these American wars of conquest. And finally, I want to talk about some geological information. First of all, Fukushima over by the reactors, they've gotten a swarm of moderate quakes, which is only going to help shake, rattle, and roll things in those reactors further on down to wherever they're going here. But over in the Canary Islands, the El Hierro volcano has been quaking and looks like it's about to erupt. Now, this is a different island than the La Palma Island and the Cumbre Vieja volcano. But a lot of people are very, very concerned because that Cumbre Vieja volcano, the western part of that volcano, is already starting to slip and slide. And if there were an eruption in that volcano that could trigger an entire landslide of that volume of matter into the ocean, it would sort of look like Mount St. Helens, where that whole northern face of the volcano fell off all at once, only this is a lot larger. And were it to do that and go into the Atlantic Ocean, there would be monster tsunamis all over the eastern seaboard. And so we're watching that situation. Scientists are now saying that the magma chamber underneath the Yellowstone supervolcano is far larger than they thought. And it is a reminder that the power of nature is still way beyond human capability to alter it. And I know the carbon Nazis are out there saying that if you pay a carbon tax, we will stop climate from changing. And that is completely absurd. Climate always changes. In the 4.5 billion year history of planet Earth, there has never been a time when climate was not changing. All life forms alter the environment around them. That is inescapable. But our government is really good at taxing you to solve made-up problems like global warming. But when something like Fukushima happens, or the Gulf oil disaster happens, or accidents with GMO happens, they can't do a thing about it. They don't know how. They just have the corporate media tell you, it's okay, it's not a problem. A little radiation is good for you. A little vaccine, a little mercury in your vaccines is good for you. Just go on believing us and all will be well. But they can't really do anything about the real problems that are out there, especially the problems they've created for themselves, like private central banking, which has plunged the government and the people of the United States into an unpayable black hole of debt. But they're going to go on trying. They're going to go on trying. They're going to keep trying to force everybody onto Obamacare to get those new tax revenues. And because that's not working out too well, I am predicting on this show that when the snow starts to melt in spring, Obama is going to go back to talking to us about a carbon tax and how we must save the future of Earth from this human-caused global warming. All right, there's the music. It's time for us to call it a day. We will be back tomorrow. Please make a point of going over to Republic Broadcasting. I know it's the start of the year, not the end of the year fundraising. Hit that donate button. It'll take you to where you can use a PayPal link. There's a postal address in Round Rock, Texas, where you can send donations anonymously. We do need your help to stay on the air. We need your help to grow. We need your help to get the information out to the American people so they can make good choices. Thank you for all of you who did support us, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.